I'll try, though, not to be as formal as the title you gave to my introduction. State of the Union speeches, Tim, are typically reserved to presidents, not chairmen. But having said that, I welcome this opportunity to address all of you. We are a large organization, as you know. It's over 40,000 players, and our focus is the players first and foremost. But we have about 110 clubs across the world, a number of them in the US, but a number of them as well in important parts of this planet. I know some of you on the call, but obviously most of you don't know me. So I thought I would share a few pointers about my past. Tim touched on a few things already, but I will do that to the extent that they relate to the speech itself and the way they're meaningful in the way Tim and I have been trying to run the organization for the past 10 years. By now, I suppose that you all hear that I come from France. Not managed to lose that accent over the years. I did grow up in Paris. I then moved to the States for college, and as Tim said, I've been in Chicago now for most of the past 40 years. I played soccer in France, came to the US, played in college, then joined the amateur league in the Chicago area and started playing in the amateur environment. And to this day, I continue to play. Tim and I speak regularly, and I'm always happy on Monday or Tuesday to be able to tell him that I scored a couple of goals on Saturday. Despite my old age, I'm still very proud of that. But not only did I play, but I became a referee early on and really enjoy the ability that I had as a referee to impact the game in a positive manner. I had children and then became a coach. And I think I coach, like many of you, all ages, boys and girls, from the U8 all the way to the high school age. I had 2 boys and 1 girl. The 3 of them played. I spent a great deal of those 40 years driving around the state and the region and the country, bringing them to State Cup, regionals, and other tournaments. I think I have a pretty good understanding of the youth scene, and I think I spent a great deal of time driving around those events, and gave me an opportunity to appreciate the American system for what it was. My kids played in high school, and then 2 of them went on to play in college. I believe that one of the traits of my character that you will pick on either today or the time to come is that, and I think it sets me aside from most others with European accent in the US, is the belief, and it's a deep-rooted belief that I have, that the US had a great developmental program 25, 30 years ago, and to a degree continues to do so on the girls and women's side. I believe, and that relates to our State of the Union, that a relative failure as far as US soccer is concerned is a refusal to acknowledge that the good that we had and this ill-placed belief that we would make American soccer better by importing European ideas and concept, which is now becoming obvious, have failed us. I think Rush, is a soccer success in many ways because it stayed true to its roots and transparent to its mission. I really believe that the union suffer, and when I say union, I mean American soccer, from 2 evils, and the evils because they last a long time and it's difficult to change and go back. But we suffer certainly from a leadership that's a non-soccer leadership. Tim knows that Michel Platini and I are close friends, and Michel has always told me in regards to his work at UEFA and in other large organizations that when soccer is led by non-soccer people, meaning people who don't love the sport, then it's bound to fail. And unfortunately, in the US, we've had a lot of this for the past 20 years. And the second, I think, evil is this constant idea that we are better off relying on European consultants, rather than improving the thing that we've done well in the past. Tim and I both had at times with US Soccer, and I think we share the same perspective that it was 20 years ago in Tim's case, and for me up until several years ago, it was going in the wrong direction. Personally, I was invited to join the US Soccer Federation Foundation right after the 1994 World Cup. Most of you know that the federation is in Chicago, that the opening game of the World Cup was in Chicago, and being involved as a referee, administrator, player, the leadership of Youth Soccer introduced me to the then newly elected president, Alan Rothenberg, who very quickly invited me to join the board of the foundation that was founded and funded and created with the profit of the 1994 World Cup. And I served the federation in various capacity at the foundation, but at the federation as well, until last fall when I stepped down. Sunil Gulati, and that relates more to our work with Rush, invited me to join the task force on player development in 2006, where right after he was elected president. And I joined the ranks of Claudio Reyna and Bob Bradley and many others in trying to define, design, prepare the future of youth soccer in America. As with many other federation experiences, it was extremely frustrating. Frustrating because while we discussed a lot of important issues, and some that still haven't been resolved today, we were clearly not invited in the decision-making process. It was more a consulting body than anything, and we would discuss high school for boys and girls, we would discuss the curriculum, and I would read in the press a few months, and after those discussions, that the committee had supposedly voted to ban high school soccer for young men and women, which we never did. We supposedly voted the creation of the academy program, which we never did. We did discuss, and in the end, those decisions, whether to ban or not high school or the way the academy was created, came in the way. I still believe today in other things that could have done far better and which would have much greater impact than those two. Now, it's always easy after the fact to point fingers, but I think people have to assume responsibility for their success and their failure. And on this, the people in charge, and Sunil Gulati and his inner circles, made those decisions, and I know from the fact that those decisions were based on the number of expensive consultants who were hired, who were all either British, French, or German, and who looked at what we were doing in the US with no understanding whatsoever of what high school meant or what college meant, and said, we do it this way in Europe, and this is the way it should be done. And it has led to the situation that we face today, and all of you who are involved with your club know what I'm referring to. I run 2 professional clubs. Tim mentioned that. I was on the board of AS Monaco for almost 10 years prior to acting as president, as GM for a full year. And then ran the New York Red Bulls for 2+ years, more recently, it was 2012 to 2014. And, like everybody else in those positions, I don't know that I was really prepared for the responsibilities that came with those positions, but I learned a lot. And clearly, what I learned in Europe, running Monaco and being on the board for a long time, there were a lot of bad things going on in the world of professional soccer, which we should do our best to keep away from the US, and that we should attempt to design a program and design a league or a series of leagues in the US that would not import those bad habits. When I ran the New York Red Bull, then I witnessed firsthand that non-soccer leadership of MLS and their friends and consultants at US Soccer were all unconsciously into importing those corrupt principles that prevailed in Europe. And unfortunately, it has held all of us back, and that's partially why US Soccer has not met all our expectations. I think, getting into greater details of this would surely require a real State of the Union type address in a couple hours. But I'm quite open, today or some other times to answer your email or questions, because I know that I touch on issues that are important to most of you. What is important here is to relate what I just said to the way Tim and the board and many of you run the organization. It's about the children, it's about their growth and keeping all types of opportunities available to them. But it's a lot about the love of the game and the pleasure that we have to promote something that we think carries many important life values. And obviously it's about making the game as enjoyable as possible for all. I said earlier that I believe that the US has a great development program. I think we've done great disservice to our boys and girls in banning high school soccer and disregarding college. Strangely enough, if you think about it, the US continues to dominate women's soccer around the world, despite the fact that most pro clubs today, from England to Italy, have started women's program, but they've modeled those programs on the men's game. And what you see, from Arsenal to Lyon, to mention those two, is the belief that what worked for men will work for women. Whether it does in the end or not, there's greater competition for women's soccer than we've ever seen. When I watched, like most of you, the Women World Cup, that the first one that we won in California, I thought that within 20 years, the world would catch up and it would be a lot harder for the US to dominate. And strangely enough, it's not the case. We tend to be way ahead of the rest of the world, and you have to wonder why. In America, we have alienated the men's program for all the reasons that I've touched on, but we refuse at the same time to acknowledge that the US women's success, should have led us to question the merits of these imported ideas. It means in great part recognizing that college soccer, it's a reality that a difficult time comprehending that people will continue to ignore it, but college soccer keeps 25,000 young men and about 30,000 young women playing soccer competitively between the age of 18 and 21. There's not a country in the world where you have that population of young adult playing the sport, and it doesn't matter, and I think most of you who've been exposed to it know that, it doesn't matter whether the young women or the young man plays for a D1 program or a D3 program. They all believe that they could make it pro. They all take it as seriously as professional. And granted, it's not the same thing to play even for, I'll mention Indiana because we're not far from here, than it is to play for the Development Academy program of Monaco. But at the end, the drive is there in both cases. We have, in many ways refused to acknowledge that, when in fact the women's game tell us that it seems to be working. We've kept this concept that women players should play college and then maybe turn pro. And we see example over and over of such players who go to college for 2-3 years, now, as we do in other sports, which is the other mystery to me. We continue to send football players or basketball players to college. It varies according to the sports and the time, whether they stay 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, but we seem to view merit in having them in the environment. We've surely done away with that on the men's side, trying to convince promising 16-year-old that they should abandon their college eligibility and join very mediocre programs at MLS, which 10 years running seems to continuously surprise people that the only star, so to speak, that America has managed to produce in the past 10 years is a former Rush player who now plays for Chelsea and never had anything to do with the MLS program. So I would hope that as we go forward, that we at Rush and all of us who are still involved in one fashion or another can impact the union so that some of those ideas get revisited. As Tim said, in fact, he asked me 10 years ago to join Rush. I had met him through a number of friends prior to moving to Monaco. I was very quick to understand what Rush could do for Monaco and how Monaco could potentially help Rush. So we signed an agreement at the time. Unfortunately, I left Monaco, and people who came after me didn't share the same vision, but we tried to replicate those relationships over the years with other clubs. Not so much that we want to send the top players of Rush to Europe, but we feel that it's important to provide for this minority of players who would really like to have opportunities post or pre or post colleges to have ties with clubs around the world, and we continue to work on that. Together with the members of the board, we've tried to keep Rush what I call purpose-built and mission-driven, and I think you sense that in the exchanges that you have with the board and team. Congratulations to all of you for making us where we are today. I'm excited about the past, but I'm even more excited for the future. We have a great project, and I'm sure that the team will cover some of them over the coming days. Thank you for listening this morning.